So the talk's called How Rigid Limitations Can Be Liberating, a visual signature for the Falconeer and Bulwark, which are the games I've made. I work alone, so solo dev, whatever. I sit alone for a lot of times, and I get lonely, so I start tweeting the weirdest shit. If you follow me, you get the rantest of the rant. And Doc posted this thing about auteur theory, which I had no idea existed or what it was, but I like the idea of signature. And I added it to this talk because I said, in our time and age, having an original signature is literally the only sword you have as an artist. And I think I stick by that. I find it interesting, the word your only sword, because we are sort of besieged by AI art on one side, and an industry that wants to make mindless, sedating entertainment. That is, I saw a tweet from someone who said, my AI art will change everything. I'll have an endless, infinite open world, and it will deliver me everything I want because it knows what I want, and it will generate it, and that's paradise. And I thought, yeah, well, you might think that's paradise. I'll call that heroin. And so for me, that is the opposite of that is, letting yourself be known in whatever you make, having a signature, which is, if you look at fine arts, is what is it, the symbolism behind it, how it's made. But it can also be, someone said, "Wow, that's really hard this morning." So, but if you go to a museum, you will have like a little statuette from, Celtic days, from someone in their house of a little private deity, and you would see how they clayed it, modeled it themselves, but you can see the fingerprints. That's a signature. You can actually see someone made it, and that is, in a sense, powerful. So that's I shoehorned that into my talk about creative limitations a little bit, because all those things sort of combine for me. So a signature, and then because I work alone, I have a lot of hats. I don't have a lot of hats, but I put on a lot of hats. So there's things, you want to be, practically, why do you want to have a signature? You want to be recognizable, because there's a lot of games out there. There's a lot of visual artists out there. There's a lot of concept arts out there. Lots of audio designers out there. If I can't recognize you, who are you then? Which leads into the business guys. You can't copy something if you have a great signature. Well, you can, but it's not the same. You can go into Midjourney and copy whatever great artist, but it's not actually by that artist, so it loses its value. But if you have something that's so singular to you, it's also about you, and you can't be copied, and it becomes unique. And this works for concept artists when in our industry when we start up a game, say, oh, what kind of visual style do we want? And they put up mood boards with Studio Ghibli, or cyberpunk, or The Witcher, or super real, hyper real, whatever the fuck you call it. We'll put all these styles, and we expect all our visual artists to be able to be fluent in any of these styles and just switch like this. And what that means for the visual artist is that you're worthless. You're just a cog in a machine. You can do everything. You're replaceable. And that's why, the big studios, I'm trying to, charge it up a bit, but they're nice people usually. But that's what they want, replaceable little artists that fit in their studio, that fit their style. That's why I make style guides and art directors to, give you that one style. I work alone, I don't want to do that. So I want to make my own style. The artist in me says it's also about being human, like I said. If I play something and there's no sign of humanity in there, it's just, soma, drug to sedate me, which is infinite enjoyment, infinite cookie clicker. That's part of our industry where we want that. We want people to be stuck and sit in their chair and be, zoned out with an HMD on their face, we've got the best, most addictive game. That is one side, that's not a side I particularly like. The other side is where you can connect with someone, where you can provide a meaningful narrative or take them on a journey. And you can sort of meet the people that made it, Like I said, you go up close to a painting and you can see how someone painted it. And that, in a sense, is a sort of a connection you have with, movie directors who will tell personal stories. And because the easiest one is like music. We all think, we can have debates about AI art, but we can't have debates about AI music because it's got no soul. And everybody will sort of get that. So for me, having a signature is proof that a human being made this. That whoever plays any of my games, they're playing something by me, and they can see it in every fucking thing in their game. And that is meaningful, to me at least. Hopefully to them as well. So that is a little bit about, what I want to sort of bring into my talk about creative limitations, and because that for me is my signature, I guess. So I started off I've been in the industry for 20 years, and I don't run down all the insignificant stuff I did, but I did a lot, and it's not all great. But one thing I did was great. At some point, because I got frustrated in work, I started modding Skyrim for fun, and being a professional 3D artist, I could paint stuff and sculpt airships and monkeys. It's a bit dark here, but and add raptors to the world. It was sort of fun. That sort of took off, and then suddenly 1 million people were downloading that. I went, oh, okay. And I've always worked in work for hire. So other people paid me to do stuff and told me, this is what you're going to do. And then I made a mod, which went, oh, I like that. But it's quite tedious, you're modeling stuff, and then you're painting, sculpting it, and then normal maps, and it's very... someone said a chaotic person. I am of the chaotic persuasion, and I'm also quite lazy. At some point I thought, well, this was 2012, and we were all doing 3D models with radiosity lights, so gray models with lights, with these soft shadows, and all look so photoreal and touchable. I like that, so I thought, well, I'll make a little demo for myself. I'll start making a game for myself, not for a client or for the studio. And I won't use, without textures, so I'll try to get that look. And this is what came out after, a couple of weeks of fiddling. And for me, I went, fuck, that is nice. It's got no textures, that was a thing, but it's all simple shapes, and it's smoothing groups, basically. And for me, I've carried this, I don't even have the code anymore, but I have the picture. I upsampled it with AI, I'm sorry, because the old was like 800 by 600. And I stumbled upon this way of doing it, and it started by saying, well, I can't use any textures. I'll just use gradients, and I'll just use vertex paint. So this is how I did. This is way max 2012 or something. So it's basically you model stuff, then you take care to do the smoothing groups. So you don't go low poly. I'm not interested in low poly per se. People say it's low poly, but sure, but it's not. It's actually, and then you add. Back then I added UV coordinates, and then in shaders, I made a shader that said, based on the UV coordinate, interpolate between, in this case, black and red. And then add some radiosity colors that 3ds Max then would bake into the vertex colors. And add some Fresnel. And voila, something came out with, like you saw, which looked really nice and different and clean. And it took a little bit of time, but it was simple. People were sort of doing that thing already, but nobody have gone as far as say, well, I'm not allowing myself to use any textures. So I came up with this set of rules, which is close to a decade ago. So no pre-generated textures, because I use fonts and render textures. And in my latest games, I generate a Perlin noise and store it in a texture, because the console would burn up if I did that every frame. So no Photoshop is hurt in any way. No Substance Designer, none of that. I wouldn't know how you guys how do you do that? I have no idea. I extended to the GUI, so no sprite, because once you start do it well. And so it's only vertex colors, alpha, shaders, geometries, and tech art mostly. And I've been doing that. Oh, well, this is the game I never released that. Oh, good, I fucked up my. This is the game I made, which I never released with that style back in 2013. It is quite a dark game about capturing little creatures that are lost souls and then either saving them or re-spawning them as your slaves. It's quite dark. it was quite a dark period of my life. That's one of the reasons I never finished it. Once I wasn't that dark, I looked at it, I go, oh, that's bleak. But I did, I loved the style. So I spent the next 8 years or something doing stuff, working on that game. That's the birth card for my eldest son. That's another game that released that nobody played. Everybody has that. No, I do. That's some prototypes or some game jam stuff. And at some point, I made that demo of a person on a bird flying around a world, which was just reusing all that old art, but then in a third-person perspective. So that is the birthplace for my actual first game, the Falconeer. And it all started out with that little rule set. Someone years ago, 15 years ago, whatever, from advertising, said, he had a presentation, said, the smaller the prison, the more interesting the breakout. And I'm pretty sure it's a famous quote by someone. I've Googled it, can't find who it's by. It's not mine. But I love that sentence because it encapsulates what I was doing. I was giving myself very rigid limits, a prison, and I was trying to break out and create the environments, the art, the visuals I wanted. And along the way, I found all these new ways of doing stuff, which were different, and what came out looked slightly different. And it allowed me to, I call it creative meandering, because being of the chaotic persuasion, I am not super focused. Well, I can be super focused, but I'll all over the place. And I spent 15, 17 years trying to, doing, oh, maybe you should do a course on Scrum. Oh, yeah, well, this is how Jira works. And I fucking hated it. I couldn't do it. I want to, go somewhere and follow it and just wander off, because that's the most enjoyable thing to me. And I get lots of stuff done, but it's not always where I need to be. By saying this, these fairly rigid rules, I could still do that and retain focus, because everything was stuck to these rules. So if I sawed it off and made something, it was all done in the same rules, that I'd learn something new within the rules, or I'd make something new would be applicable. Because the output is super consistent. If I go back, everything, you can't put it in the same game, but you can see it's the same style. You could reuse the same assets. Everything is the same thing. It works together. It has the same shaders, the same technology, the same ideas. And it allows me to be a creative hoarder, which I like, because my girlfriend watched that on TV, all these people with their houses filled with stuff. I'll make stuff and put it away, and then later I'll go, I can use that. And I'll show you later, I literally use everything I make, even if I'm just meandering off to somewhere completely senseless. I'll come back and I found a use for that. This is not always appreciated by gamers, but I like it. So, one meandering, which of course people like, talk about the tech behind this, is sine waves. So at some point I needed a GUI and I needed gauges, health bars and stuff. And I figured out you can use the UV cords and clamp the UV, and then it's black and white, and you can move that up. Just simple math. If you apply a sine wave to that, you can wave that, UV graph. And if you move the sine wave, you get that, which was nice. And that's just a bit of geometry, so no sprites. But that is just a UV cord visualized into an interpolated sine wave made, and once I figured that out, I go, wow, I'll go crazy. And I spent, I did 6 months making stuff with sine waves. So I made, bloody tentacles that sucked from a cross, because you can never have enough Catholic crosses, I guess. Not super original. But I mean, like little arms that came out from the screen. But messing around with that, I also realized I have a 3D interface that's just stuck on the camera. I can interact from the 3D interface into the world. So I started making that idea, well, when I grab a soul, it'll come out of the interface. And it's literally coming out of the camera into because I would never have figured it out with the default Unity canvas system. Just by going there, I found something new, and it was interesting and weird. And when I made my game, which one I finally finished, the Falconeer, I was still using all this science stuff, but now I was using it to change the motion of the sails. So I like sailing. I don't know why, because it's boring to most people, but I sort of enjoy it. And sails have to, you have to tack, and they get tighter when you're on the wind, and they get looser when you have the wind from the behind. And it's just adding some sine waves or half a sine waves, multiply by tau, blah, blah, blah. I don't know any of this stuff. I just wall bash it. I just try it out and see what happens. And oh, this is obviously too big a curve. This is too much. I should have used half pi or a pi and a half or whatever. And so sine deformation became something I enjoyed doing. At some point for a game, I went ahead and thought, well, can I make a single phase mesh and deform it with sine waves to become like a sharp, like you would do in an avatar creator. It's all deformations. And I did it, and then I used vertex colors because that's all I could use. I couldn't use textures to put all the facial hair and the lips so that had different colors, which you can see, like on the left, you can see the different masking I used from the vertex colors, and lots of sliders for faces. That's the first iteration of, you get chins that fall in, but it's just what the big boys do, and I wanted to do it, but I didn't, we didn't have real faces back then. And that's all this stuff. It's all UV chords of that face, you can see here, this is just the band of the eyes. So I've masked out that, and that would move apart or move, scale up or whatever. I use that in my new game. Wow, that looks pixelated. I'm still building on that, so my new game will have characters, will have an evolved version of this, with better animation and sliding, tessellation and stuff. But just, it's like I'm a creative hoarder. I made it once, I'll always reuse it. Why throw it away? And that's how I made the entire Falconeer. All these bits I'd been doing, I just stuck them in. I'd figure out something out. I did all the interface bits and render textures. As so far as I took that slide out because it's only 40 minutes. We're already halfway there, so oops. So even I made my own cloud system because you can't use textures. I don't know how to do volumetric ray marching and all that shit. I'm not smart enough. But you can take spheres, and I looked online. You can give them a Fresnel, inverted Fresnel, and you have a fluffy sphere. Then you can put a texture on it, but all the spheres will start blinking in and out. Well, if you do a world position shader or a triplanar world shader for all the clouds, for all the noise you're going to put on there, you can actually have all the clouds have the same noise, and you don't see the patterns anymore. I'll have more some screenshots of that. So I just fucking about, got me all the stuff, and I just put it in the game, and that turned out to be the Falconeer, which I released in 2020 on Xbox as a launch title. It's a weird indie thing that got snowed under a bit, but did well. Still let me make games. And then the main thing it allows me to do is that always I have to go back to that stupid rule set. It allows me to be as chaotic as I want to be. But everything I do remains cohesive, so usable. So going from overall score, so that was the first game, to that's a bit from the Falconeer. Well, you can see the clouds in there and stuff. So it's not particles, it's little spheres and stuff with noise. To this other game, to my new game. It's an evolving visual style, but it's remarkably consistent because I have these rules, and I apparently am very, how do you call it, hardneckig, stubborn, to be able to do this for 10 years. And it's weird because you think, well, isn't this guy going to get bored of it? But the more you do it, the better you get at it. And the more new stuff you discover, and the more joyous it becomes to go back to some models you did 5 years ago and go, oh, I can pimp this to way better now, because I have new tricks. I can't explain it, but, it's things. The other thing that when it's cohesive, technically, aesthetically, but it's also because I'm allowing myself to wander and not care about Jira or task boards or what the fuck. Well, I care about paying my mortgage, let me not lie, which is a great motivator. But on the whole, I allow myself to wander off. Is that you wander into things which are more instinctual than, look, I want to make a Studio Ghibli beautiful forest environment, which is, everybody's first thing they want to do when you get an engine, I guess, if I look at Twitter. At some point, my wife's a ceramic artist. I made that thing in the previous game. It's a creature being squeezed by a hand, and the hand is its cape. It's a weasel of some sort. On the left, I said, oh yeah, that's you. And I went, no, that's just some creature that has a cape, and it's a hand, looks cool. We don't do that kind of stuff. No, that's you. You're being squeezed. You're in a burnout. That's how it feels. I did, no. As she was right, I was making all these creatures that were, while having a fairly severe burnout, moment in my life. And that was what that dark overall, the first game video is all about that. And I had no idea that you do. Apparently everybody does this, and people, artists in history are much more aware than I was, because I was a video game artist stuck in the idea that, I make something to entertain the player and engage, but not emotionally meaningful to myself. At the end, 3 years later, I made that 7 years ago, stuck it in the Falconeer. I was going, I need to make some DLC for the Falconeer, and we had, need to make DLC. Okay, I'll do some pirate stuff. Okay, I'll put the pirates on a base on a giant turtle. So I make this giant turtle. And I think, okay, but they have a tower, they have a little house on a giant turtle, they have some way to control the turtle. Okay, I need to strap in the turtle and bind it up some way, and that's how they control the turtle. I made it, and I looked at it, and I said, fuck, I made another creature that's stuck and wants to escape. And I hadn't even thought about it. And I can look at so much of what I do, it's always those same, the themes always come back. The entire game, the first thing, the entire Falconeer is about people on birds, fighting and being able to not overcome their conflicts. But the world is beautiful, so the first time I made it and made a sunset, and looked, wow, that's aspirational, flying off into the sunset. And I realized what I was doing, you want to be free, that is the theme I'm trying to do here. If you do this for a while, you start analyzing your own work for themes and symbolisms. And it's not a complex, I'm not fucking high art, but it's a simple symbolism you can pick up for yourself, what you like to do. You can play around with it, because you can learn to recognize it, and you can be intellectual. I realized, okay, that is a theme, wanting to escape and be free, but it's also, nothing by itself. It's just aspirational. And that needs a contrast, because I already had that ocean, because that's, when you're making an open world by yourself, you can't, oceans are fantastic, because they're empty. I said, so okay, the contrast is the ocean. The ocean is the darkness, that is the deep, that is where the secrets are, the thing they're trying to escape from, which they can never escape from in this world, is going to be the oceans. And from that I made undersea stuff, but I also made giant water canyons where you can dive, because I said, well, we're making an air combat game, but we need to dive into the ocean. I made giant holes in the ocean. It's sort of fancy, who cares? And every theme of the Falconeer, the game after that made itself, everything you see in the Falconeer is just a play on that theme. It's just think, well, okay, how can I take that core theme and put it in everything I do? Everything. It's underwater, or you need to go underwater to grab it, to be able to escape into the air. That is the core, entire visual, coherent nature is figuring out, I wanted to be free, that was what I did, and taking that emotional layer, analyzing it, and put it in everything, and it just made itself. So it's not super thought out, and the pacing is all wrong, and it takes fucking 6 hours of playtime before you see any of this stuff, which is a mistake. But that's all there, It's a very, the people that go through it, they figure it out, and it works, and I like it, because that's, that's a signature. That's putting a piece of myself in there for other people to recognize, and the fact that a real person did that is meaningful. It's to me, or it's what I'm attempting to do.
The cycle.
Going back. So I'm nearly on time. They said I had to be fast. So I'm making a new game, which is a city builder, because I've had 3 kids now, and the world's a fire, and I want to make fortresses to feel safe. Figured that out with pretty safe. So that's taken, and it's an evolved version of the same thing. It's the same thing I say to indies nowadays. When you want to stand out, we're talking about game jams, and people say, well, I'm a little bit tired of it. If we all make things, in a game jam, if it's, we are stuck, especially in this mode where we make a game, we launch it, doesn't get traction. It's shit. We'll do another game jam, come up with new mechanics, new art, new story, and these all become throwaway pieces. I don't ascribe to that, because you are throwing away your time and effort. You're not giving you the opportunity to figure out what was wrong and fix it, and you're not building upon yourself. Every time you're reinventing the wheel, you're shooting out something in the world to marketing and everything. It is a nonsensical way of doing it, and all the big guys figure this out, because that's why we have infinite Marvel and infinite Disney. But you got to build on what you got. So my next game it's the same world, and I figured out people are not super interested in 90s style air combat in today's world of high precision mouse-driven shooters. And I looked at, but I had a couple of concepts, and one was to build stuff. Well, actually, the mother of my children said, what did you like about Falconeer? What was the thing you enjoyed doing most? Because you need to go through another 3 years, better find the most enjoyable thing. I enjoyed building all the towns and stuff like this, the locations and the creative vibe, sort of Bob Rossing around and just, kit bashing stuff together. So it looks nice. I said, well, can't you make a game about that? So I'm doing that.
The cycle begins anew.
The screen has still.
A new refuge. A haven. A bastion from which to rebuild. But this time we will succeed. We will build higher. We will build stronger. We will dream a new world.
Okay. So thank you. And as you will notice, so much of the assets is all just from the Falconeer. It's going to be a little combat because I already made that, so why not use it? It's just figure out a new way to look at what you've done and reimagine it. All the city stuff is new because, I want to burn up some GPUs. But in the end, it's, So that is how I got where, today I'm doing this and still sticking to these rigid limitations because they allow me to be free in ways I could otherwise not. They can focus you while you are meandering off, and you get to create from within and reach new destinations. Like I said, you find new technical solutions, but you also find what you want to truly express in a way and put that in there and make your game art, if it were. You present a human connection to your audience. This is a fear I have. This virtual arcade where you can go in and get lost forever and never meet a real person except someone else going noob, noob, noob. I think when you show that someone made it and show the like the same way they are auto-tuning Freddie Mercury on Spotify now. All these old libraries are being sold and they're auto-tuning. They're taking away all the authenticity. The breaking of the voice when he gets older and all this stuff. That is human. You take the humanity out of it, and we end up in a place I don't think we should be going very deep. And as a side benefit, you create a signature to spit at our future AI overlords, because fuck those. I think that's my talk. I got to throw stuff at people.
Awesome, thank you. We have some time for questions, and you better have one so that Thomas can throw this at you. Oh, there's one back there.
Okay.
All right. Let's go.
Sort of.
All right.
Hello.
Yeah?
Thank you for your talk. It was very inspiring.
Thank you.
We can see you have a unique approach to video game making. You said it's because you go with the flow, basically. You follow whatever is in your head. But how is that sustainable, like economically? Wasn't it hard in the beginning?
Okay, so I can say all these things and also say, go look at Rami's talk and do all his business lessons. Because you can't, there's nothing wrong with being business savvy and smart. But I have to admit, for the Falconeer, there was no question I was going to do it. It was going to be that at bust, and at launch I had to get some advance from my publisher because I was literally out of money, which is scary because then something goes bad, no launch is perfect. And Derek de Geus in the podcast, he said, how do you motivate yourself? How do you keep going, making new stuff year after year? And I said, motivation is easy. I have 3 kids. I have a mortgage. If I don't do this, I have to find a job. And jobs weren't healthy for me. And so that is, I can only say this is how I do it. It took me 17 years of doing the other stuff detrimental to myself. How do it economically? for instance, Bulwark, I can find the theme, like I said, the intellectual thing where you look at what you want to do, but also see how it can work for your game. It works also for economics. So after Bulwark, I had 2 game ideas. One was a sailing game, sort of a trading game with a sailboat in the same world, a sort of prequel. And the other was make, a fortress builder. And I did go on Steam. I did get, subscribed to Simon Careless's newsletter and read everything about Steam Discovery, figure out the biggest or the 3rd biggest genre is city builders. I went, okay, so fantasy air combat with 90s control schemes, not a big niche. City building, giant niche. So I did base my choice on making some smart economical moves. But you have to comprehend, it's not it's the thing you have to feel. So how far you want to do it, but you have to be smart. But I do believe you can, apply this on someone like me who's been around for a lot of times, I've been around for 20 years and have a good network. If you're big and small, and I see it around me, the people are, like in collectives, they do the same thing. They want to be free and they're willing to sacrifice for it, and because they are free, they start doing interesting stuff. So I have faith that if you are willing to take that leap, it ultimately will pay off. Or you figure out it's not for you, also fine. But there is a pattern there. I'm not a sociologist or an economist, but I can see it happening in people.
Thank you.
Ooh, one back up here.
All right, it made it. Thanks for the talk. I had a question. How does it? You clearly have like a very strong signature in your work, and like you say, you're a bit stubborn. How does that work in combination with working with your publisher?
I have a publisher who sort of figure out it's best to leave me alone, and they'll sort of. But you also have to push me to get. We need a sort of a timeline because we need to book shows and stuff. My publisher has no creative input.
That's good.
So they'll nag at me, Thomas, can you make the mouse keyboard controls better? Can you work on that earlier, perhaps? and I'll agree with them, and I'll do it at some point. But I am willing to bend some of the rules, Rami's rules, and say, okay, I'll take a worse deal for more freedom. So the publisher is there to support me in the way I want to work, and if that not, then I wouldn't have had a publisher.
No, that's good. Okay, thank you.
Nobody else?
Oh, one over here, which is
Oh yeah, throw it
really great. It's so
way
far.
there.
I love it.
Ja, daar in de hoek, onder het Dutch Media Week bord.
Okay, I'm not sure how I want to phrase that question, but it kind of relates to what you were asking. It's because you work with Benedict Nichols.
Yeah.
Does your music, and the soundtrack of the Falconeer is it's insane.
Oh yeah, well, so okay. The music, Benedict's. When we first got together, I just gave him some music. I said, okay, I want Mongolian throat singing because I love that shit. And here's Gesaffelstein because it's aggressive, and make me something that combines that. And he made something. And afterwards, he'll shoot me stuff to listen to, and I'll go, oh, that's nice, or it could be. But I don't actually. The thing I apply to myself, I want to apply to him as well. So I want to give him maximum freedom to do what he wants to do. And we work that way, and sometimes I'll have good ideas, sometimes he'll come with bagpipes and stuff. And go, oh yeah, that's epic. And I find it's a luxury to be able to do that, because I work for hire, you never have that. You're always. So I find that a great luxury, and I figure out I perform better when someone is not screaming or not dictating what I want to do. And if you can find a way to have someone else have a bit of that freedom, that'd be good. I'm not saying I don't. Some say, I need a trailer, this bit needs to go out or something. You have to work together, and they're practical. But on the whole, I want to say, do it. What do you think? And that's been the win. We're doing it again, and it sounds fantastic. So that's a good collaboration where both of you can be free, and not be a director that says, I want this.
All right, thanks. That was the answer to the question I didn't ask but wanted, so thanks.
Okay.
Okay, hi. So you were a bit adversarial towards AI art, but I was wondering, like, it could actually also sort of act as a tool for the artists, of course. So do you see it potentially in the future adding towards, you know, as a source for your creative hoarding, like an AI tool that you could train on your own art style?
I think, so lots of the Bulwark is procedural generation, how the walls are, which is, it's the kid next door from AI art. I solved a little bit, what I don't like about it is, look at me, I'm an artist because I made a picture in Midjourney and it took me hours. You know, it's not, what's your process, what's your signature there? You're just aesthetically interesting stuff. It's flat. You know, I liken it to, you know, EDM. Well, the first time you get, you know, I don't make music, but you get your first drum computer to, you go, fuck, I made music. And but you actually, any musician will tell you, just press some buttons. It's, you know, you're just a kid. So I think AI art, I dislike we live in a society, everybody wants to signal everything, and, you know, we all looking for, how do you call it, validation of that we're creative. As a tool, I find it super interesting. You know, it's an interesting tool, it does interesting stuff, it will allow people to, like I said, if you can train your own, with this I'm making my own procedural system, so I have to explore my own creative pathways and reproduce it so that I can, you know, have towns that I find interesting and messy and chaotic and all that stuff. So that in that sense, I don't know where that's going to go. I can get, you know, people say, you're a Luddite, when I say I don't like it. And I said, but Ned Ludd was right. All the weavers, and especially their children, 150 years ago, had the shittiest time. They all lost their jobs from machine weaving, and then Ned Ludd started burning, weaving looms. But afterwards, they all had a shit time, had to work in the mines, and the kids had to use their little hands by child labor. So the Luddites were right. Their time was fucked. You know, and I do think visual artists are, you know, going to be pushed out in a lot of work. And I said, you know, find your signature, because someone else is going to be able to do all that, you know, stuff they want, the production work. So I think there's a danger there. But in the end, art, it's going to be a tool, and artists are going to make interesting stuff with it. You know, and it's going to be amazing as well. But you know, just like a top EDM producer will make something completely original from someone just opening up his, you know, drum computer and do boom de boom. But we're not there. I think there's, you know, lots of social media isn't helping, and, you know, all that stuff. And I've sort of, you know, doing less of the discourse because it's not functional. You know, we're all going to figure out that if you're making a Midjourney and you're just going to send it into a fine arts competition without telling anybody, you're a bit of a dick. We're all going to have a cultural ethics towards it in 5 or 10 years or next year. I think that'll sort itself out, and then you have to deal with whatever the culture says it's going to be. Is it going to be epic or going to be shit? That's up to us, I guess.
All right, thank you.
I think we are completely out of time now.
12 seconds.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Thomas.